right, welcome to the Let's Talk podcast with myself, Collier, Mason, and Sarah. Today we're talking about Chapter 9, Radio Sports Broadcasting. We'll start with a little discussion about what Chapter 9 has to say about sports broadcasting, do a little discussion about some questions. Then later in the podcast we'll be interviewing our guest Faxon, which is a sports broadcaster, and we'll learn more about him later. But to get started with what sports has to say, Chapter 9 has a interesting discussion on the sports broadcasting world and the most three important roles. And it says that one of the most three important roles is a color commentator, which is someone who brings like the humor to the table in like the broadcasting world, has like the insight, and usually that's like a former player of the sport or like someone who's like known in the sports world. They're like what like media comes for. The fans like love engaging with them on online social media. Then the other important role is the play-by-play commentator, the one actually doing the broadcasting for the people who can't see or like listening, watching it each play, saying what happens, their like takes on the game, what's going on, and letting people like know and keep up with the game. And there's also the sideline reporter, which is usually only for national games like broadcast, which goes up and down the sideline interviewing players, coaches, getting the injury reports on like players in the game, the penalties, what the refs are doing, and sometimes even interacting with the fans. So what do you guys think is the hardest role of those three, or takes the most skill?
Um, in my opinion, I think the play is definitely the hardest. I think as a commentator in that area, you have to know the game so much more than, the others would. Like for as the color commentator, um, I mean they played the game before, but it's not like they have a dynamic understanding of every aspect of the game. For example, like a football player, Pat McAfee. He's a kicker, but he doesn't know what QBs are thinking, and he doesn't know the play calls that they're playing every time. But with a play-by-play, first of all, you're speaking to an audience half the time that isn't even watching, which is listening by radio or any other form of listening. And so you kind of have to visualize the game for them. So you have to constantly be talking about everything, people in motion, like if the quarterback's in shotgun. So you really have to completely talk about the game and everything that's happening at it at all times and know exactly what you're talking about.
I completely agree with Collier. Like it's already hard enough like trying to do that live, but also having the knowledge to understand all that in like a fraction of a time like that. Just to reiterate his point, like sure these like color commentary guys, they play the sport, they know the sport very well, but they just don't know everything. Like they're not gonna know like every single little aspect of the game, what a play-by-play commentator does on the daily.
Yeah, I agree with y'all. I do think the color commentator is a really, really hard, crucial role in everything because, they can't mess up. Like everything is be recording in the moment. So it's not like they can take a few seconds to go back and forth and like be like, hey, did I get this play right? No, they have to like have the details, the facts right, everything. I would say the easiest, like least hardest role on the field is gonna be the sideline reporter. And I think the biggest reason why that's the more easier role is because they're just doing hands-on communication with the coach and the players, on the sideline after the game, like, hey, you know, Antonio Brown, like, how was your touchdown? Like, how were you feeling? Ask them, like, what they ate before in the locker room. Just kind of like friendly kind of banter, friendly conversation. So I think it's a lot easier, like, hey, you came back from a loss last week. That was a show-stopping win. How are you feeling? How do you think the future looks for now in the playoff picture? Just like little details. What do y'all think about that stance?
For sure.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sarah. But with Mason and Collier, I don't agree with you two. Personally, I think the color commentator is the hardest. Because like, think of a guy like Pat McAfee. He's like 24/7, all like guys. Like that's his personality on screen is who he is, and like I don't think anyone can just do that because you can't really teach like humor and like interaction like that. Because I really think like put anyone in a play-by-play, get them enough games, they'll be able to cast like anything really after like enough practice. But I don't think anyone can like match Pat McAfee on what he like brings to the table in terms of his like energy and like personality. So I think you have to be like born for that role, really. So I really think color commentator is like really hard to role.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I think that color commentators totally get all the credit when it comes to commentating. They're just like they're entertainment, and that's what you want to listen to when you're watching whatever sport you're watching. And that's why I think play-by-play commentators are a little bit underappreciated because most of the time you're not listening to a play-by-play. Like you don't want to hear every single thing that's happening unless you're not able to watch the game. And radio's almost a thing of the past at this point. So I think difficulty wise, play by play is like the hardest, but I think the most valuable position is the color commentating, especially when it comes to a new era with the Pat McAfee type, where they're purely looking at entertainment rather than just looking at the plays. And also when it comes to like sideline reporters, like yes, I think their job is the easiest, but they also have a completely different role. Like they often have to create like relationships with both like the coaches, the referees, and the players. So they have a completely different role, in my opinion, where they have to become, a friends and have like a first name basis with these coaches. Like if you look at some sideline reporters for college football over the years, all of them are friends with Nick Saban. Like every time they're coming in for halftime, it's like, oh, hey, Carrie, like how are you doing? So to have that relationship with a coach allows them to have better interviews and get more out of them without sounding disrespectful if they were to ask a question about injury updates or anything like that. So I think they all play a different role, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses.
One prominent example I will say from the Clemson game, and after we made it into the playoffs, there was that one interview with it was Miami's head coach, and he was like, "Hey, Dabo Sweeney, I got you in, baby." I think it's just that level of personality and like personal relationship that they have is just so crucial. And I completely agree with you, Collier. I think
Absolutely.
it's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also agree.
Yep.
So to bring in something else that Chapter 9 said, they also talked about the progress of a play-by-play broadcaster, like what their career looks like path-wise. And the book, at least, says that they should like start out like a low college entry high school level, like play-by-play cast from like a small team. And after like a couple years of practice, really like recording your reps, like refining your game, making sure like learning from like the best. They said after that you should like try to slowly work your way up a level of like a low level team. So maybe after high school, go to like a minor league team, staying there for a couple of years, probably getting
Hmm.
yourself out on social media, LinkedIn, and then like eventually after like I think it's like a decade of working, then you get to the like major leagues of like broadcasting.
Hmm.
And I will say like to me that sounds pretty outdated. So what do you guys think of like modern broadcasting? Like is that like the path you take, or should you do like a podcast? Probably try to get yourself that way like your own. So like I don't think you need like a low level entry job now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like, um, podcasts and like other sources of like media have like basically kind of replaced that almost in a certain way. Like there's not really like an entry level anymore. I mean, look at Tom Brady. He like started doing broadcasting and he's like saying, I give that pass a 5 out of 10, or I give that pass a 7 out of 10. It's like very like low common denominator, basically. It just doesn't, yeah, I agree. Like, doesn't seem like there's no like level or like low level entry into the industry anymore.
Yeah. Um, I'd kind of, I agree and disagree with that kind of.
Mm.
I think it's totally worth it. Like if you really want to go into the commentating world, I think high school is like amazing experience. You get the practice of talking in front of tons of people and learning the game. And to talk about Tom Brady, uh, he went straight into commentating and his first 3 weeks of commentating, he got absolutely fried by everyone talking about how horrible his commentating was. So I don't think it's necessarily you don't have to do it. I mean, obviously there's the podcast route and with social media, there's tons of different routes you can take. But I would definitely say that having that low level experience really um, gives you the ability to learn the sport and know how to commentate when you get in front of that big audience when you get your opportunity.
No, I completely agree with that, Collier. I think too that, TikTok, Instagram Reels have completely revolutionized the way that we receive our sports news today. It's not just so much like you have to be on ESPN or CBN Sports or whatever to really be getting the news. Because again, like we said, radio is a thing of the past. If we're gonna keep reinforcing that, I mean, it's true. But I will say it doesn't seem like you need to have a college degree to even get your foot in the door anymore. It's almost like anybody can just willy-nilly be like, hey, today I think I want to report last week's game. I want to talk about how the Ravens absolutely killed the Steelers. Like they want to sit there and talk about it. They can. I mean, they have the right. They have the resources. They have TikTok, and they can kind of just build their own platform and be like, hey, these are my thoughts on this game, vice versa, like what I would do, what I would improve, where I think the weaknesses were. And I think that it helps, but I also think it kind of hurts today, especially a lot of, young college kids like us, like trying to pursue a degree in like the sports broadcasting realm. I think it kind of does hurt a little bit because, we're coming up against a lot of competition from all these other schools and stuff. And it's not just so much about our degree, it's about your LinkedIn, it's about like your connections and everything. And I think that it kind of does hurt us a little bit because people that don't have a degree can just go make their own podcasts and stuff and kind of be like, I'm going to be a football reporter today. And you're like, hey, you didn't go to Clemson, and it doesn't matter. So I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I think getting a degree is I think that's what most people seem like is the best option. But I really think I think it evolves too fast. I think most people started getting a degree, getting sports practice, but now they're realizing that oh, maybe I should have just been doing my own thing for a while. Because they're while they're finishing their degree, there are people that have already been broadcasting for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there are some jobs don't even require a degree anymore. They just want to see your portfolio, what you've done.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily true that you have to get a degree to go into it, but it's not really the degree that's important. It's what you learn, when you're going through that degree. So I feel like it gives you a competitive edge if you go through college and you get a degree and you learn the ins and outs of how sport and society work together. Um, that's something you really wouldn't get to see if you go straight from high school and go straight to commentating. Um, I think it gives you an edge, and I think it gives you a better ability to rise up in the ranks and accomplish what you want to do. But then again, like we said before, the whole social media podcast era is in, and if you know, I mean, if you know how to talk, if you know how to get people's attention, um, I mean, it's totally possible that you can just skip the whole college route and go straight into what you want to do. So it's really up to the person. Like it's based on experience, and if you feel like you're confident enough to do it, I think it's totally possible you don't have to go to college to do it anyways.
Yeah, personally, I think maybe the best route someone could take is what I guess Mason did with Sam was saying while you're in college going to your degree on the back end doing your own podcast on your own time. It's not that you get
Hmm.
the best of both worlds. You have the degree, you have the years of experience at the same time, and I think that's I think that's really your best chance.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
I agree. I think that going and already doing your own podcast and putting your foot in the door is such a important, crucial thing. And this may help us later on. We might think right now that this is just, our sports project, but this might actually really help us maybe continue doing podcasts, continue pursuing this, but also we might gain connections, like Sam was saying. I mean, you never know. The world is our oyster. And in the sports world, I mean, resources are so limited right now. I mean, it's just so competitive that we have to get out there and we have to strive for our best. Whether we're going to be a sports reporter, a color commentator, or even a play-by-play, reporter. It doesn't matter which one you choose, or even a beat reporter, not in our chapter, but anything like that, we have the chance, we have the resources, like just go get it. But I think the degree does say a lot, especially with Clemson, and the strong ties with the Tiger and everything. So I think that it will be crucial for us and might help us. What are y'all's thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, like seems common sense.
Yeah.
All right, guys, this is Faxon. So he is the host of Faxon Sports. He has over 300 plays under his belt, which is insanely sick. So the first question that I really want to ask you is, what drew you into doing Faxon Sports, like having your own radio show? Like, was that always a dream of yours? And how did you get that far, that fast?
Yeah, yeah, to be honest, it wasn't something that I had, planned out my whole life. I was a high school athlete, like I feel like a lot of people who end up in sports are. And, I was just athletically limited. I could have played like low level D1 sports and wasn't going anywhere with the pros, but I knew I loved sports and I knew it was my passion. So, I started getting into broadcasting my senior year of high school with some unpaid internships and stuff along those lines. And I feel like I quickly kind of realized at that point that this was my passion and that I wasn't meant to be playing. I was meant to be talking about it. So from that point onwards, I got an unpaid internship with 1055 The Roar, which is the station I work for now, the flagship station for Clemson Athletics. Worked about 6 months unpaid and then got a little bit of a break to do the Mickey Plyler show on Wednesday mornings and be his producer and co-host. And then my bosses gave me a chance to do a 1 hour night show every week. And from there, it was just about, trying to crush it every time I was given an opportunity behind a microphone and, put my all into it. And thankfully, I was blessed enough to have the opportunity this past summer to kind of speed up my graduation to get out in 3 years. And, God just opened a door for me. And, I walked through to be able to be where I'm at now. So it's been a blessing. Everything has moved super fast, but yeah, it wasn't always something that I had planned out. I really wanted to play at a high level. I just wasn't good enough, to be honest with you. So had to find an alternate route to make sure I was staying in sports.
Yeah, that's amazing though. Seriously. I mean, you've really moved up. Is the next big thing, like, are you thinking maybe you want to report for ESPN, like be like a top dog reporter? Would you want to be like a color commentator or do you want to be like a play-by-play? Like, what is your...
Yeah, to be honest, play-by-play is definitely my goal, and play-by-play on TV is definitely my ultimate goal. I love doing the radio, and I will continue to do the radio probably for a long time. But my ultimate passion is doing play-by-play on TV, and I've had a ton of opportunities over the last 3 to 4 years to get some reps in at schools like Furman, USC Upstate. I've done some work for Clemson as well on TV, on ACC and X. So I've really been fortunate with some of the opportunities that I've been blessed with, and that is my true passion and ultimate goal is to be on ESPN one day as a play-by-play broadcaster. I love doing the radio. I love doing talk show radio, and I will continue to do that for the foreseeable future. But ultimately, one day I would like to move on and, focus my full time to being a play-by-play broadcaster on TV.
Right. Absolutely.
I have a question.
Do you have anything? Oh,
Go on.
I was going to ask Collier if you wanted to go.
Got it, Mason. I'll go after you.
Okay. I just wanted to ask a question. So you've hosted like college radio and all that. And you've also worked with larger networks as well. How do you compare between those? And is there any like unique challenges or freedoms in those different settings at all?
Yeah, every school has kind of its unique environment when related to the workplace. At Clemson, they do a phenomenal job of making my life really easy when I broadcast a game for Clemson, whether it be on TV or like I just got back from Boston doing women's basketball on the radio. Like Clemson has the resources and the facilities to make your life very easy as a broadcaster with some of the resources that they provide as far as information goes. And then like when I'm doing a TV game for Clemson, In comparison to the other schools I work at, it's very easy because you've got an entire production crew that's dedicated to helping you succeed. And, my boss at Clemson is Rick Bagby. He does an unbelievable job, and him and his crew are always super prepared with graphics. The transitions are always smooth, always clean. And, they're always in my ear, telling me when to get in and get out of breaks. So, those games are really set up for me to succeed, in my opinion. Now, I do work at a lot of smaller schools as well, like Furman and USC Upstate, and I'm unbelievably blessed to have those opportunities. But as you guys probably know, the reality is there's not as much funding there, and there's not as many resources. There's not as many people that are going to be dedicated to helping put on the broadcast. So it is a little bit different. I wouldn't say a better versus worse type of thing, but it is a little bit different. And at the smaller schools that I do work for, I would say that there's more pressure on myself to kind of coordinate everything, whether it be, suggesting that we should go to a replay or trying to take another look at something, or saying, hey, let's go to break right here because I can see that they're at the media, but we don't have two cameras in the gym. We only have one. So nobody else can tell that we're going to media timeout if there's something going on with the officiating. So it's just like the small stuff like that and the nuances that are a little bit different. And then this year at Furman, their women's basketball team's actually playing at North Greenville, because their stadium's being renovated. So that's created an interesting broadcast dynamic, to be honest with you, because we're actually on a delay. So I have a 5-second delay in my ear when I'm hearing my producer versus what's actually happening on the court in front of me. So that makes like the timing and some of the stuff getting out to break and transitioning pretty unique and pretty weird. But I would say ultimately, like, all these schools do the best with the resources that they're given. And it is a little bit different from a lower level school to a mid-level school to a high level school, just like it is in athletics with like the quality of players. You got more people that are going to help you out when you're at a school like Clemson, and you have more people that are in your corner trying to help you succeed.
Sweet. Thanks for that, Faxon. That was really informative. Um, gonna hop in and kind of stay on that topic of smaller schools and whatnot. So you said that play-by-play is like really what you want to do in the future. And obviously with those smaller programs, there's less star power and names. So you kind of have to do a lot of preparation for a play-by-play day. Can you kind of walk us through what a preparation day for a play-by-play broadcasting would look like for you?
Yeah, to be honest, I usually do my prep 2, 3 days in advance. And one of the unique things about broadcasting too is most schools do it by season, by sports season. So you'll get all your games at the beginning of the sports season. So you can kind of map out when you're going to have to work. It's not like they're calling you up 3 days before and saying, hey, like, we need you in 3 days. It's usually a little bit more planned out than that. So you go into having to prepare for a broadcast with kind of an understanding of, what the timing is going to look like from when you need to prepare to when the actual broadcast is. And to your point, at the smaller schools, like, obviously there's no Cam Canarella, right? When I'm doing a Clemson baseball game, like, those are some easy storylines because he's going #1 in the draft and he's really freaking good. And then Clemson's got a ton of studs, right? And the same thing can be said for men's basketball. Like, they're 18-4, they're really freaking good. They got a lot of good players. So like the storylines kind of create themselves in those, but at the lower level schools, you kind of have to hunt a little bit more for it. And you kind of have to be a little bit more tapped into the team, if that makes sense. Like, for the work I do at Furman and USC Upstate, I'm watching all the road games. I'm keeping up with the storylines. I'm in contact with the SIDs, just trying to make sure I have my finger on the pulse of the team, if that makes sense. So I know I can do the best job possible representing their program and, making their program look as good as possible. And I view that as my role. So as far as like the actual physical preparation goes, I usually try and get my prep knocked out at least 48 hours in advance. Spotting boards are what I use, which is just essentially like, you got to get all the names, you got to get all the hometowns, you got to get all the height and weight, you got to get all the statistics, you got to get it on one page. And that's a lot easier said than done. Thankfully, there's a lot of great resources online that can help with that. And there are a couple people, and I've been blessed enough to have some really talented people around me that can kind of show me the way. But there's some resources online that can really help with that. And I use like templates, for example, and then just have to print them out. But the main goal of preparation, I would say, for a play-by-play broadcaster or color commentator or anything you have to be on air, you got to get as much information on the sheet as humanly possible. And it also needs to be easily accessible and easily readable as well. And that can be some of the challenging things. Like, my vision is not great, to be honest. So sometimes I'm struggling if the text is super small. So I got to make sure I'm on my P's and Q's and making sure that everything is readable for me. And then on top of that as well, like, there are a couple different things that go into preparing for like pronunciations, for example. There are schools that at the lower level that don't have pronunciation guides. All Power Fours have pronunciation guides, so you can go to their website and you can click on their game notes and whatnot, and you got everything spelled out. So like for me on my spotting boards, if it's a weird pronunciation, I'd like to just write the name out phonetically because it doesn't matter how their name is actually spelled. It matters how it needs to sound to the audience to make sure you're ensuring correct pronunciation. So I would say those are some of the nuances that go into preparing for a broadcast, but it definitely is something that, if it's your first time preparing for a broadcast, you're going to suck at it and you're not going to get everything right. And you're not going to be able to get everything on the sheet and you're probably going to screw up during the game. And this is something that you really can't get better at unless you're doing it and learning how to do it as well. So you kind of got to make your mistakes and pay your dues to an extent and figure out what formula works for you. The formula that works for me might not work for somebody else in their preparation and spotting boards. But for me, I feel like I've been able to nail down a system that works, that's efficient, and that I can get to all the information I need to get to pretty easily and accessibly.
For sure. Appreciate that. Caleb?
Caleb.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, out of like your entire experience, what do you think has been like your most favorite moment? Like either like calling the game, interacting with someone in like the business. What do you think is like the top moment for you?
To be honest, I'm gonna give two answers: a Clemson-related answer and a non-Clemson-related answer. Clemson-related answer would be last year because I was still a student, and obviously, like some of those guys are my best friends on the team. So getting to go out to Los Angeles and do the halftime for the network show, that's probably my best moment from a Clemson broadcasting perspective. It was really cool to just, see some of my best friends in the world live like their dreams out. And like some of my childhood friends, even like RJ Godfrey was on our team last year, knowing that kid since I was like 4 years old. So getting to see him like shine on the big stage was such a cool moment for me personally. And then getting to be involved with the broadcast crew at Clemson and, them instilling that level of trust in me at 21 meant a lot. And I know they didn't have to do it, but that meant a lot to me. And then non-Clemson related, I would say, was definitely doing national radio sidelines this year at Georgia Tech. Went to like 7 overtimes, and I was having to walk back and forth every single time they were doing the stupid 2-point conversion thing. I walked out of the Sanford Stadium with like 33,000 steps or something absolutely ridiculous. My legs were exhausted. I had to drive all the way back and then wake up at like 6 a.m. the next morning to get up and do Tiger pregame show and Tiger tailgate show. And we played South Carolina, and that was not a very fond memory this year, as I'm sure you guys would all agree. But yeah, I would say that Georgia Tech game was unbelievable. Like everything with Clemson is just like obviously a little bit different for me from an emotional perspective because I'm an alum, like I'm a lifelong fan, got friends on pretty much all the teams and coaching staff. So like obviously that's going to have a more intimate connection for me and that's going to mean a little bit more. But getting to do that Georgia Tech game and get outside of the Clemson area and expand my horizon a little bit, it was really cool to be able to experience that. And all the people at Georgia were first class and treated me super well. I got to interview Carson Beck after the game as well and talk to Kirby for a little bit. So yeah, that was definitely a really cool experience.
Yeah, that does seem pretty awesome.
Yeah, I remember watching that Georgia Tech game on TV, and that was maybe the best football game I've seen in the last 10 years. So
It was crazy.
Being there during the actual game, especially getting to talk to Kirby and Carson after the game.
Yeah, and it was funny because like the Georgia fans were filing out when they were down 2 scores with like 8 minutes left. Like they were leaving, and and then everybody came flooding back in and was trying to get back in when I think Haynes like either fumbled or something. I don't really remember how the game ended right now off the top of my head, but I think Haynes King fumbled and then Georgia got right back in it as a result of that, and then everybody started trying to get back in the stadium. So that was pretty funny to see.
Have you struggled with like anything like with reporting? Like when you first started out, did you have like anything that like you just not so much failed, but you weren't doing as proficient? Like how did you get through that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I've faced a little bit of scrutiny because of my age, and because what I'm doing at the age I'm doing, a lot of people aren't used to it. So like I feel like for me, the biggest part of that was having to overcome that mentally, like starting doing this at 18, like nobody's super mature at 18, right? And you think you got everything figured out, but you really don't. So like seeing people online talk crap and stuff, like it definitely got to me a little bit at the beginning of my career. And I definitely let that, kind of hit my confidence a little bit when I was a little bit younger. But the reality is that like not everybody's going to like you for any reason in life, and especially when doing something like I'm doing. Like, there's people that get in the car every day and hear me on the radio, and they're like, "Oh, this kid sucks," and they turn the channel. But for every one that doesn't think I'm good, there's 10 that do think I'm good. So for me, it's been just kind of about like refocusing what my mentality is and focusing on the positives, and being grateful for the opportunities that I've been given instead of focusing on what the negatives are and for the people that may not like me. And then as far as like a proficiency standpoint goes, I think it's just about on-air confidence. Like, there's no way to really replicate the pressure of having thousands of people listening to you live until you do it and you can kind of feel it. I love it personally. I've always kind of loved it, and I feel like that's what when I knew that this was for me. Was when I got that feeling for the first time and I felt that pressure, because I'm a firm believer that pressure is a privilege. So when I just continued to take that mentality and not really worry about what anybody else had to say and just locked in on me, I feel like that's kind of when I took the next step as a broadcaster.
I appreciate that positive outlook on that situation. And it really does go to show. I have never watched your show before, but I think we should tune in now and listen.
Yeah, y'all should tune in. 9 to
Hey,
12,
what's
Monday through
up?
Friday.
All right. Um, One question. Obviously, you've gone through a lot to get to the position where you are. For a lot of people who want to get into the profession and who want to do what you would do, what is your main, what advice would you give them? And um, what advice would you give them when it comes to um, like ignoring people who say, "Oh, you can't do this," and et cetera? Like, what do you think is the first step someone should take in order to get into the position that you are right now?
Don't say no and show up to everything, whether it's unpaid, whether you got to drive 3 hours, whether it might not be the most glamorous opportunity in the world, and it might not even be an opportunity at all. But like for me, I'm a firm believer that 98% of this is about mindset and how you approach certain situations and certain opportunities. I drove 6.5 hours to Charlottesville, Virginia, a couple years ago because somebody got COVID and a national radio guy needed me to be his analyst at the last second. So he called me, I got in the car and drove and canceled everything else that was going on in my life that weekend. Like, yeah, I wanted to go out with my friends and have some fun, but this was the priority and I knew that that was what it was going to take. So like, to be honest with you, a lot of this is like sacrifice, and a lot of this is making it the priority and making it the focal point. Don't say no. Don't be afraid to show up to something that's an unpaid opportunity and keep showing up and be consistent with showing up. Like, I was at every men's, women's basketball game, baseball game, softball game that I was in town for the entire time I was a student. And a part of that was because I wanted to be there. But a part of that was because you're bumping shoulders and shaking hands with the people that make important decisions. And you get the chance to establish those connections and network and get to know the people that are in the position that you want to be. So for me, it was just about staying as close to everybody as I possibly could, always trying to showcase my work ethic and say yes and showing up, even if it wasn't the most glamorous opportunity in the world, because, that opportunity that I had in Charlottesville, now I've got that contact for life. And his name's Noah Britt. He works with like the Gridiron Radio National Network. And he called me on the phone this year and said, "Hey, one of our guys can't do it for Georgia Tech." So if I didn't drive up there to Charlottesville a year and a half ago and do that baseball series, then I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to do what I just described to y'all as the coolest moment of my career so far outside of Clemson. And then he also, I went to Louisiana for the Sun Belt Championship game to do the same thing the week after because he thought I did a really good job. So it's really just about getting your foot in the door. And once you get your foot in the door, everything becomes infinitely easier. And the last thing I would say is just be nice to everybody. As stupid as it may sound, be nice to everybody and be kind to everybody. For me, that was always what I tried to do and go out of my way to be nice to people, make people feel like they're valued, make people feel like they're important. Because a lot of these people do so much work for these schools and institutions and don't ever get any of the credit or acclaim. And you don't really understand how that works until you get to see how everything operates up close. So that would be my bottom line of advice is keep showing up. Don't say no to opportunities when they come about, and make this a priority and be nice to everybody and do it with a smile on your face.
Sure.
That's great advice. I have just one more question for you. And this is more of a fun question. Are there any like broadcasters or like personalities on like radio or t TV that you look up to in the industry at all?
Yeah, there are a lot. I think that that's actually kind of an important dynamic in this industry is, you got to be able to acknowledge when somebody is good slash great, and you got to know what it looks like to be good, great. And for me, like the guy that works at my station, who does a lot of the play-by-play work for Clemson is William Qualkenbush. And that's somebody that I've always really looked up to. And I've been lucky enough to have him as kind of a mentor throughout this process. And I think he does a fantastic job, and he's a really great resource to have. Don Munson, the same thing could be said for him. Obviously, the voice of the Tigers, everybody knows him. And he's been very helpful to me throughout this process as well. But as far as like a national guy goes that I think does a really good job, I've never met the guy, but Mike Monaco does play-by-play for ESPN. He's a young guy. I think he brings a lot of energy. I think he's a really quality broadcaster. So I would describe him on the national scene as somebody that I look up to. But there are a lot of people that are great at this job. And like you can view it as, hey, this guy's better than me and he does X, Y, and Z and he's got all these opportunities. And you can take that mindset, or you can say, okay, what can I learn from watching this game? What can I learn from watching this broadcast? What is he doing he's doing well? And how can I incorporate that into my lingo? Or how can I make that phrase mine and put my own spin on it to try and execute it at a little bit higher of a level? So for me, it's really just about using the resources that are in front of you. Like the easiest way to get better at broadcasting is to listen to a good broadcast and then to go try and replicate that broadcast, or call a game on your own, or even do a practice game, even if nobody's listening and it's just you in your room. I've probably done that 50 times in my life, where it's just turn on the TV, mute the TV, and pretend that I'm calling the game instead of whoever the joker is on ESPN that's doing it. And as stupid as that may sound, it helps you get better, because there's no way to get better at this unless you do it. Like you have to apply yourself and you have to do it. So that would be what my comment is on that.
Awesome. Well, Faxon, you just want to give yourself a little shout out real quick before we end things off. Where can people listen to you? Where can they see your work?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Faxon Sports. And I work for 105.5 The Roar, which is the flagship station for Clemson Athletics, 97.5 if you're in Spartanburg. And yeah, I mean, I do play-by-play broadcasting all over the upstate on ESPN Plus, ACC, and X for Clemson and stuff as well, and a lot of work for Clemson Athletic Network. So if y'all ever want to tune in, we talk a lot of college ball, we talk a lot of NFL, and we have fun with it. We keep it light. So tap in from 9 to 12, Monday through Friday.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on, Faxon. Pretty sure everyone had a great time hearing everything you had to say. So thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all. Appreciate the opportunity.
For sure.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.